Chapter 4. He slept so deeply that he did not hear Mrs. Dempster come in. She dusted the room and made his breakfast. Then she woke him with a cup of tea. After breakfast, he put a book in his pocket and went out for a walk. On the way, he bought a few sandwiches. "Then I shan't have to stop for lunch," he said to himself. He found a pretty, quiet little park and spent most of the day there studying. On his way home, he called at the hotel to thank Mrs. Wood for her kindness. She looked at him searchingly. "You must not work too hard, sir. You look pale this morning. Too much studying isn't good for anyone. But tell me, sir, did you have a good night? Mrs. Dempster told me you were still asleep when she went in." "Oh, I was all right," said Moore with a smile. "The ghosts haven't troubled me yet. But the rats had a party last night. There was one old devil with red eyes. He sat up on the chair by the fire. He didn't move until I picked up the poker. Then he ran up the rope of the alarm bell. I didn't see where he went. It was too dark." "Dear God!" cried Mrs. Wood. "An old devil sitting by the fire? Take care, sir. Take care." "What do you mean?" asked Moore in surprise. "An old devil? The old devil, perhaps." Moore started to laugh. "Please forgive me, Mrs. Wood," he said at last. "I just couldn't help laughing at the idea of the devil himself sitting by my fire." And he began to laugh again. Then he went home for dinner. That evening the noise of the rats began earlier. After dinner he sat down beside the fire and drank his tea. Then he sat down at the table and started to work again. The rats disturbed him more than the previous night. They scratched and squeaked and ran about, and stared at him from the holes in the walls. Their eyes shone like tiny lamps in the firelight. But Moore was becoming used to them. They seemed playful rather than aggressive. Sometimes the bravest rats ran out onto the floor or across the tops of the pictures. Now and again, when they disturbed him, Moore shook his papers at them. They ran to their holes at once. And so the early part of the night passed quite quietly. Moore worked hard for several hours. All at once, he was disturbed by a sudden silence. There was not a sound of running or scratching or squeaking. The huge room was as silent as the grave. Moore remembered the previous night. He looked at the chair by the fireside and got a terrible shock. There, on the great high-backed oak chair, sat the same enormous rat. It was staring at him with hate. Without thinking, Moore picked up the nearest book and threw it. It missed, and the rat did not move. So Moore again picked up the poker. Again the rat ran up the rope of the alarm bell. And once more the other rats started their scratching and squeaking. Moore was unable to see where the rat had gone. The light of the lamp did not reach as far as the high ceiling, and the fire had burned low. Moore looked at his watch. It was almost midnight. He put more wood on the fire and made a pot of tea. Then he sat down in the great oak chair by the fire and enjoyed his tea. "I wonder where that old rat went just now," he thought. "I must buy a rat trap in the morning." He lit another lamp. He placed it so that it would shine into the right-hand corner of the wall by the fireplace. He got several books ready to throw at the creature. Finally, he lifted the rope of the alarm bell. He put it on the table and fixed the end of it under the lamp. As he handled the rope, Moore noticed how pliable it was. You could hang a man with it, he thought. Then he stood back and admired his preparations. "There, my friend," he said aloud. "I think I'll learn your secret this time." He started work again, and was soon lost in his studies. But once again he was disturbed by a sudden silence. Then the bell rope moved a little, and the lamp on top of the rope moved too. Moore made sure that his books were ready for throwing. Then he looked along the rope. As he looked, the great rat dropped from the rope onto the old oak chair. It sat there staring at him angrily. He picked up a book and aimed it at the rat. The creature jumped cleverly to one side. Moore threw another book, but without success. Then, as Moore stood with a third book in his hand, ready to throw, the rat squeaked and seemed to be afraid. Moore threw the book, and it hit the rat's side. With a squeak of pain and fear, and a look of real hate, it ran up the back of the chair and made a great jump onto the rope of the alarm bell. It ran up the rope like lightning, while the heavy lamp shook with its desperate speed. Moore watched the rat carefully. By the light of the second lamp, he saw it disappear through a hole in one of the great pictures on the wall. "I shall check my unpleasant little visitor's home in the morning," said Moore to himself, as he picked up his books from the floor. "The third picture from the fireplace. I shan't forget." He examined the books. He picked up the third book that he had thrown. "This is the one that hurt him," he said to himself. Then his face turned pale. "Why, it's my mother's old Bible. How strange." He sat down to work again, and once more the rats in the walls started their noise. This did not worry him. Compared with a huge rat, these ones seemed almost friendly. But he could not work. At last he closed his books and went to bed. The first red light of morning was shining through the window as he closed his eyes. Chapter 5. He slept heavily but uneasily, and he had unpleasant dreams. Then Mrs. Dempster woke him as usual with a cup of tea, and he felt better. But his first request to her surprised the old servant very much. "Mrs. Dempster, while I'm out today, will you please dust or wash those pictures, particularly the third one from the fireplace? I want to see what they are." Again, Moore spent most of the day studying happily in the park. On his way home, he again visited Mrs. Wood at the hotel. She had a visitor with her in her comfortable sitting room. "Sir," said the landlady, "this is Dr. Thornhill." As soon as she had introduced them, the doctor began to ask Moore a great many questions. "I'm sure," said Moore to himself, "that the good doctor did not call here by accident." He turned to Dr. Thornhill. "Doctor, I'll gladly answer all your questions, if you'll just answer one of mine." The doctor seemed surprised, but he agreed at once. "Did Mrs. Wood ask you to come here and advise me?" asked Moore. The doctor looked surprised. Mrs. Wood's face turned very red, and she looked away. But the doctor was an honest, friendly man, and he answered quickly, "She did, but she didn't want you to know. She's worried about you. She doesn't like you staying there all alone, and she thinks you study too hard and drink too much strong tea. She asked me to give you some good advice. I was once a student too, you know, so I know what I'm talking about." Moore smiled and held out his hand to Dr. Thornhill. "I must thank you for your kindness, and you too, Mrs. Wood. I promise to take no more strong tea, and I'll be in bed by 1 o'clock. There. Will that please you both?" "Very much," said Dr. Thornhill. "Now, tell us all about that old house." Moore told them all about the events of the previous nights. When he told them how he had thrown the Bible, Mrs. Wood gave a little scream. When Moore had finished his story, Dr. Thornhill looked very serious. "The rat always ran up the rope of the alarm bell?" he asked. "Always." "I suppose you know," said the doctor, "what the rope is?" "No, I don't," said Moore. "It is the hangman's rope," said the doctor. "After the judge condemned someone to death, the unfortunate man was hanged with that rope." Mrs. Wood gave another scream. The doctor went to fetch her a glass of water. When he returned, he looked hard at Moore. "Listen, young man," he said. "If anything happens to you tonight, don't hesitate to ring the alarm bell. I shall be working quite late tonight, too, and I'll keep my ears open. Now don't forget." Moore laughed. "I'm sure I shan't need to do that," he said, and went home for his dinner. "I don't like that young man's story," said Dr. Thornhill after Moore had left. "Perhaps he imagined most of it. All the same, I'll listen tonight for the alarm bell. Perhaps we'll reach him in time to help him."